You're just doing this for attention. Megan. Honestly, it's pathetic. Get up. My mother's voice didn't sound like a mother's voice. It sounded like ice cracking. I was lying on the concrete floor of the basement I rented from them. My body shaking so violently, my teeth were chattering. Pneumonia. That's what the urgent care doctor had said 2 days ago, before I ran out of money for the antibiotics. I looked up. My vision blurry. My mother, Susan, was standing over me in her blue, sequined gala dress, looking at me like I was a stain on her carpet. My father, Robert, was checking his watch. My brother, Brandon, was leaning against the doorframe, scrolling on his phone. Please, I whispered. Just some water, and maybe the heater. It's so cold. My mother sighed, the sound sharp and impatient. She reached into her purse. But instead of medicine or money, she pulled out a crumpled, half-open bag of crackers. She tossed it. It hit my shoulder and slid onto the floor. There. Now stop being dramatic. We're going to be late for the charity dinner. The heater stays off. Megan, you know the rules. Rent is late. Utilities are cut. The door slammed. The lock clicked. Darkness swallowed the room again, leaving me with nothing but the sound of their footsteps fading upstairs and the cold seeping into my bones. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. I crawled toward the bag. That is not a figure of speech. My legs felt like lead pipes, heavy and useless. So I dragged myself across the freezing concrete using my elbows. The dust from the floor coated my sweaty skin, turning into a gritty paste. When I finally reached the bag, I tore it open with shaking hands. It was a bag of generic cheese crackers. The expiration date, stamped on the foil, was from 3 months ago. I ate them anyway. I ate them because my body was screaming for calories to fight the infection in my lungs. And because I had literally nothing else. The crackers were stale, soft instead of crunchy, and tasted like cardboard and salt. As I choked them down, dry, sobbing in the dark, I tried to figure out how I had let it get this bad. You might be wondering why a 27-year-old woman was living in her parents' basement, paying rent to people who hated her. It wasn't because I was lazy. It wasn't because I had failed. It was because I had been systematically trained to believe that my only value on this earth was to be a resource for others. For 5 years, I had worked 3 freelance graphic design jobs, often pulling 18-hour days, just to cover the mortgage on the house upstairs. My father, Robert, had retired early to maintain his image at the country club. And my mother, Susan, refused to budget. They told me it was my duty. They said good daughters take care of their families. So, every month, I wrote a check for $2,400, leaving me with barely enough for instant noodles and the heating bill for this basement, a bill they made me pay separately, even though the thermostat was controlled from upstairs. And then there was Brandon, my brother, the golden boy, who could do no wrong. While I was skipping college to change my dying grandmother's bedpans, a woman who, in her final will, left her entire estate to Brandon because he was the man of the family Brandon was investing. That's what they called it. I called it gambling, crypto schemes, drop-shipping businesses that never shipped a thing, luxury car rentals he couldn't afford. Every time he crashed, I was the airbag. My parents would guilt me into loaning him a few $1,000s here, a few thousand there. I never saw a dime back, not once. As I sat there in the dark, shivering, eating expired food like a rat, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't just a victim. I was a participant. There is a term for it in psychology: learned helplessness. It is the Stockholm Syndrome of the dutiful child. You see, when you are raised in an environment where love is always conditional, where affection is only given when you are useful, you start to believe that suffering is the currency of love. You think that if you just give a little more, if you just bleed a little dry, they will finally look at you and say, "Good job, Megan. We love you." I had convinced myself that their cruelty was just tough love. I had told myself that when my mother threw this bag of food at me, it was her way of caring. She didn't want me to starve. Right? She was just busy. She had a gala to get to. But the cold clarity of pneumonia has a way of cutting through the fog. As the stale cheese powder coated my tongue, I realized the truth. They didn't leave because they were busy. They left because watching me die was inconvenient. They didn't throw me the food because they loved me. They threw it because it was trash. And in their eyes, so was I. I was the invisible engine that kept their luxury life running. And they were letting the engine rust out in the basement because they assumed I would never break down. They assumed I would always be there. Silent. Compliant. And grateful for the scraps. I wiped the tears from my face with a dirty sleeve. The shivering was getting worse. I knew I needed to eat more to keep my strength up. So I reached back into the bag to see if there were any crumbs left. My fingers brushed against something that wasn't a cracker. It felt smooth and glossy. Like a piece of cardstock. I pulled it out. It was a promotional insert. The kind they put inside snack bags to advertise a contest. I almost crumpled it up and threw it away. But the light from the street lamp outside the tiny basement window caught the silver scratch-off panel. And for some reason, maybe just to give my hand something to do to stop the shaking, I started to scratch it with my fingernail. Under the dim light of that street lamp, the silver scratch-off coating flaked away under my fingernail, falling like glitter onto my dirty jeans. I didn't expect anything. I was just delaying the moment where I had to swallow another stale cracker. I revealed the first letter, G, then R, then A. My heart gave a strange, hollow thump against my ribs. I scratched faster, desperate now. The letters formed words that made no sense in my freezing. Feverish reality. Grand prize winner. Below the words was a 12-digit code and a website address. I fumbled for my phone. The screen was cracked in a spiderweb pattern from when Brandon had knocked it out of my hand 2 months ago during a tantrum about his crypto losses. I had 5% battery left. My fingers were stiff from the cold, making it hard to type. I entered the URL. I typed the code. I hit verify. A loading circle spun. 1 second. 2 seconds. Then, the screen turned gold. Confetti animated across the cracks. Congratulations! You have claimed the national jackpot. Value $35 million. I stared at the number. 35. Followed by 6 zeros. I started to laugh. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was a wet, wheezing sound that tore at my inflamed lungs. The irony was suffocating. My mother had thrown this bag at my head to humiliate me. She had tossed it like refuse to show me exactly where I stood in the pecking order somewhere below the family dog. And in her arrogance, in her haste to get to a gala where she could pretend to be a philanthropist, she had literally thrown away a fortune. She had handed me my freedom because she couldn't be bothered to check the expiration date. It was the ultimate karmic joke. The treasure wasn't in the vault. It was in the trash bag. The laughter turned into a coughing fit that wouldn't stop. My chest felt like it was caving in. The gold screen blurred. The cold from the floor rushed up to meet me. And the last thing I remember was the phone slipping from my hand as the darkness took me completely. I woke up to the sound of beeping. Consistent. Rhythmic beeping. The air didn't smell like mold and dust anymore. It smelled like antiseptic and lavender. I opened my eyes. I was in a hospital bed, buried under 3 warm blankets, and sitting in the plastic chair next to me, asleep with her head on her chest, was Aunt Linda. My parents hated Linda. They called her the failure of the family because she worked as a receptionist and lived in a small walk-up apartment. They mocked her cheap clothes and her lack of ambition. But as I looked at her, I didn't see a failure. I saw the only person who had ever looked at me with kindness. I tried to sit up, and she snapped awake instantly. "Megan," she breathed, rushing to the bedside. Her eyes were red-rimmed. "Thank God. You've been out for 2 days." "How?" I croaked. My throat felt like sandpaper. "I saw them leave," she whispered, smoothing the hair back from my forehead. Her hands were rough, but her touch was gentle. "I saw Susan get in the car in that dress. And I knew. I just knew they hadn't taken care of you." I waited until they turned the corner. and I used my spare key. When I found you, you were blue. Megan, you weren't breathing right. She started to cry. Quiet tears that she quickly wiped away. I called 911. The doctors said if I had been an hour later, your organs were shutting down. I looked at this woman who had nothing. My parents had millions in assets, big houses, and fancy cars. And they had left me to die. Linda had a maxed out credit card and a 10-year-old car. And she had saved my life. That is the thing about generosity. It is not measured by the size of the check. It is measured by what it costs you to give it. For my parents, $1,000 was nothing. Yet they wouldn't give it. For Linda, the ambulance copay alone was probably a month of groceries. But she hadn't hesitated. Linda, I whispered. My phone. Where is my phone? It's right here. She handed it to me. It was on the floor next to you. You were clutching a cracker wrapper like it was gold. It is, I said. Open the browser. She looked confused. But she unlocked the phone. The page was still there. Refreshed and waiting. She read it. She stopped. She read it again. She looked at me. Her face draining of color. 35 million, she mouthed. Is this real? It's real, I said. My strength returning with every word. And half of it is yours. No, she said instantly. No, Megan, that's yours. We can argue about the math later, I said, grabbing her hand. But right now, I need you to do something for me. I need a lawyer, not a family friend, not someone my father knows. I need a shark, someone who eats people like my parents for breakfast. Linda looked at the screen, then at me. A slow, fierce smile spread across her face. It was the smile of someone who had been the underdog for too long. I know a guy, she said. He handled my divorce. He's mean. You'll love him. I went back to the basement 3 days later. Linda wanted me to stay with her. But I told her I couldn't. Not yet. If I disappeared now, they would change the locks, throw out my things, and potentially destroy the paper trail I needed to bury them. So, I returned to the scene of the crime, armed with a new burner phone hidden in my boot and a digital voice recorder taped to the underside of my mattress. The house was empty when I arrived. The air in the basement was still frigid. A stagnant pool of cold that smelled of damp concrete and the ghosts of my own desperation. I sat on the edge of the bed, wrapped in my coat, and waited. I didn't have to wait long. I heard the heavy thud of the front door upstairs, followed by the click-clack of my mother's heels and the heavy tread of my father's boots. They were back from their long weekend at the gala and the subsequent spa trip they had treated themselves to while I was fighting for oxygen. Megan. My father's voice boomed through the floorboards. It wasn't a greeting. It was a summons. I didn't move. A minute later, the basement door flew open. Robert stood at the top of the stairs, his face flushed with the kind of anger that usually preceded a lecture about gratitude. The house is freezing, he barked. I told you to check the boiler pilot light before we left. Did you do it? I looked up at him. I wasn't shaking this time. The fever had broken, and in its place was a cold, hard knot of hatred. I was in the hospital. Dad, I said calmly. I had pneumonia. He waved his hand dismissively, as if swatting away a fly. Oh, stop it. You're always sick. You probably just slept all weekend. Get up here and fix the heat. I'm not paying a technician $300 for something you can do. I walked up the stairs. I moved slowly, not because I was weak, but because I was memorizing him. I was memorizing the way his jowls shook with entitlement. I was memorizing the way he looked at me, not as a daughter, but as a faulty appliance that needed percussive maintenance. In the kitchen, my mother was unpacking a suitcase. She tossed a pile of dirty laundry onto the table. Since you're up, she said, not even looking at me. These need to be dry cleaned, and don't shrink the silk this time. She finally glanced at me. her eyes narrowing as she took in my pale face and the hospital bracelet I had deliberately left on my wrist. She let out a short provis. Sharp laugh. Still wearing that god. You commit to the bit. Don't you? Let me guess. You want us to reimburse you for the ambulance ride? Linda paid for it, I said. Susan stiffened. Linda. You called Linda great. Now the whole family is going to hear some sob story about how we abandoned you. You are so manipulative. Megan, we leave you alone for 2 days to learn some independence. And you go crying to the family failure. I could have died. Mom. But you didn't. She snapped. You're standing right here. Stop being so dramatic. Then Brandon walked in. He looked tan and rested, wearing a new leather jacket that probably cost more than my car. He didn't ask how I was. He didn't ask why I looked like a ghost. He walked straight to the fridge, grabbed a beer, and turned to me with a grin that made my skin crawl. Hey, Meg, good timing. I need a favor. I don't have any money. Brandon, I said. Relax. I don't need cash right this second. I need you to sign something. He pulled a folded paper from his pocket. It's a guarantor form for a business loan. This crypto thing is about to blow up. But the bank needs a cosigner with steady income history. Since you've been grinding away at those freelance gigs, your credit is actually decent. He held out a pen. Just sign it. I'll give you 5% of the profits. It's a sure thing. I looked at the pen. Then I looked at my family. My father? Angry that he was cold. My mother? Angry that I might make her look bad. My brother? Angry that I wasn't handing over my financial future on a silver platter. They didn't feel an ounce of remorse. They had left me on the floor with a bag of garbage. And now that they were back, they just wanted to know why the help wasn't working faster. They weren't just cruel, they were predators. And they had no idea the prey had evolved. When I refused to sign Brandon's paperwork and told them I was broke after losing my biggest client, they dismissed me as useless. My father ordered me to fix the heater and finish the laundry like I was still their servant. I smiled quietly. Because every insult was being recorded beneath my shirt. They thought they were putting me back in my place. In reality, they were documenting their own downfall. The next morning, I sat across from Arthur Vance, a corporate shark with a glass and chrome office overlooking the city. He didn't waste time. We have a federal problem, he said. Your parents' problem. A title search revealed the truth. My grandmother had subdivided the property years ago. The main house went to my parents, but the basement apartment was legally deeded to me. I had owned it the entire time. For 5 years, I had paid rent on my own property. Worse. Vance showed me a waiver, transferring my ownership back to my parents for $1 signed with a forged version of my name. Mail fraud. Theft by deception. Nearly $150. 000 stolen from me. A felony. They hadn't just taken my money. They had stolen my inheritance and used it to imprison me. I didn't want a settlement. I wanted my house back and justice. That night, eviction papers and criminal complaints were served. When my parents rushed downstairs to confront me, the basement was empty. I was already gone. They met me an hour later in a penthouse suite. Warm. Guarded. Final. They tried guilt. Then anger. Then fear. I corrected them calmly. They weren't my benefactors. I was their landlord. I explained. Sunk cost fallacy. How I had kept investing love and money into people who only consumed. I'm liquidating. I told them, you're written off. Then I showed them the truth they never saw coming. The lottery ticket hidden inside the cracker wrapper my mother had thrown at my head. $35 million. Mine alone. Sealed in trust. I left them the wrapper as my final rent payment and told them to leave. They were evicted within days. Assets frozen. Charges filed. My brother arrested. I didn't watch. I was busy closing on a warm, quiet house and moving in the one person who saved me. I started a foundation to help victims of financial abuse reclaim their lives. People say money saved me. It didn't. Money just gave me the door. I chose to walk through it and lock it behind me.